Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us this Tuesday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. This is day 4 of the war with Iran, with no end in sight. So let's jump right into it with our team tracking the very latest for us from across the Middle East and here at home. We're going to begin with NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley and reporter Matt Bodner with the very latest. Good morning to both of you. Matt Bradley, let's start with you. Can you tell us just about where you are at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm here right now in one of 2 nerve centers in Israel for what's called Magen David Adom, which is the ambulance service, the rescue and emergency service for all of Israel. I got to tell you guys, a lot of this service has been built with American donations. So what we're seeing here around me is a state-of-the-art dispatch center. It looks like what you might see in America at a 911 calling center, except that this place has heavy blast doors. We're about 100 feet underground right now. You can see there's ventilators here. This place can survive just about anything that anybody throws at it. And again, when I say state of the art, I'm meaning that actually, when there's an emergency, folks here don't even really have to pick up the phone and call the ambulance. The computer system handles it for them. And it's also able to be part of this alert system that has kept so many Israelis safe. It's places like this one that explain why, despite the fact that we have seen quite a few deaths over the past few days in Israel, why the casualty numbers here are so incredibly low compared to what we're seeing elsewhere.
Matt Bradley, let's also talk about what's going on the ground in the region. Iran stepped up its retaliatory strikes on American targets in the Middle East overnight. Tell us what we know about what sites were hit.
Yeah, well, this is all over the Gulf states, which I don't have to tell you are seen as something of a refuge in the Middle East. Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, all of the Saudi Arabia. Actually, they just said that there were drones that were fired at the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. So we're seeing a real metastasizing of this conflict, which is exactly what people were warning about if Iran got attacked. Now, whether or not this sustains, whether or not this continues, we don't really know. It's a big open question as to just how many munitions the Iranians still have left and what they're still able to throw at American targets throughout the region. The fact is that we know from the Israelis that they now enjoy almost complete air superiority over Iran. That's what they did last June when they were able to essentially fire at will, untouched by Iranian air defenses. Whether or not that means we're going to see an end to incoming missiles, well, sitting in this room right now, we've already had 2 missile alerts in just the past couple of hours. So it looks like the Iranians aren't done yet.
Matt Bodner, let's bring you into this conversation for more on what's going on now inside Iran. The Israeli military said it's launching attacks on military targets in Tehran. Many of these, though, we're learning are near residential neighborhoods. So what are we hearing from the ground about how Iranian residents are faring in this conflict? Do we know how many people in Iran have died?
Thanks, Joe. Well, as ever with Iran, it can be difficult to build a complete picture from abroad of what's going on within the country, and that's on the best of days. That said, we have been hearing from our bureau in Tehran about what's happening on the ground, and in particular, how the public is reacting to it. Accounts of that first day of the U.S. bombing campaign, they paint a chaotic and harrowing picture for civilians, in particular, the city covered in smoke, residents sitting in their homes at night, wondering where the next round of strikes will fall. As you mentioned, there are a lot of targets in the city. Among them are police stations, and a lot of them are located close to residential buildings. So we're hearing reports of civilians sitting in their homes, shaken by closely falling munitions. And so there's a lot of concern about that. We're also hearing yesterday that the city's roads were jammed with traffic. People were trying to flee to friends, to family in regions outside of Tehran. Also hearing that at least one hospital in the northwest of the city, the wards were filled with injured civilians as well as members of the militias. So today we are hearing that things are more quiet. The public is expressing mixed emotions, however, about what comes next. They're mostly concerned now about who will lead the country. Will the country even survive as a coherent whole, or is there something much darker waiting on the other side of this than the Ayatollah?
That question.
The economy. Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry, Matt Bodner. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Also, the economy is a major factor here. Already, things are more expensive. Things will continue to get more expensive, and if this goes on for too long, we're hearing people will start to struggle economically, spending their savings.
Yeah, and which was already an issue and part of those major protests that we saw months back. Matt Bodner, you bring up this question of who will lead the country. That is something that falls to what's called the Assembly of Experts in Iran. They choose the supreme leader's successor. Tell us about this group. Who's part of this assembly? Who makes that up? And do we know where they stand in the process of choosing a new supreme leader this morning?
So we're waiting now for this assembly to convene. Basically, it's a large group of what they call experts. It's basically religious clerics. And in terms of like a leadership succession battle or what that might look like, obviously the initial strike that killed the Ayatollah also hit a significant chunk of the regime's senior leadership. There are a few figures to keep an eye on. One is Aliza Reza Arafi. He was appointed on Sunday to lead a temporary transitional council, and that's where this council of experts comes in. The Iranian constitution mandates that this group meets. It's about an 88-member panel to choose a new supreme leader. The constitution says that this must happen as quickly as possible. What that means in practice will be anyone's guess. I do think it's worth pointing out there that there is a deterrent to the Iranians moving too quickly on appointing, or at least officially, publicly, a new supreme leader. And that would be to stop the United States from potentially immediately targeting that replacement. So it still could be some time.
Matt Bradley, one more question for you. The State Department, we know, has issued now evacuation orders for U.S. citizens in more than a dozen countries. Just yesterday, we spoke with a young man, an American, who was flying out of Doha. The war starts. His plane turns around, lands in Doha. He's stuck there. He had no clue how he's getting out. So what areas are most at risk, and what are the options for evacuation?
Yeah, it's a great question. But the fact is that here in Israel, we really are most at risk. But from statistics that I believe that I've been reading, the Gulf countries are getting a huge amount of incoming from Iran. I would say that the safest place you are in the Middle East isn't going to be dependent on where you actually are, but the means of protection that is available. Here in Israel, ever since the 1980s, almost every building has been required to have a bomb shelter built inside of it. And that is the standard that we're seeing in the room that I'm in right now. State-of-the-art medical emergency and early warning systems make a huge difference in terms of saving lives. And that's one of the reasons, again, why we're seeing so few casualties in Israel, despite the fact that they're getting a huge amount of the Iranian anger.
All right, Matt Bradley, Matt Bodner, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
Well, for more perspective on where this conflict is headed, let's bring in retired Colonel Peter Mansour, who was the executive officer for General David Petraeus during the Iraq War. Good morning. Thank you very much for being with us and sharing your perspective with us. We appreciate it. In this press conference yesterday that we carried here on our show, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had this to say about the possible duration of this war. We'll talk in a moment.
This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes.
So yesterday, though, after that, the president gave this timeline of 4 to 5 weeks for the potential of this active conflict. Do you think that timeline is realistic? And what do you make of Hegseth's remarks, saying it won't be endless, and also kind of giving a list of some stated goals there?
So the timeline might be according to the plan we have and the target list we want to service, and which may take 4 to 6 weeks to get through all those targets. But you know, when this conflict ends, isn't up to us. It's up to the Iranians. And if they continue to fight after those 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to have to continue to defend our facilities in the Middle East. The other nations are going to have to defend their urban areas. And we're going to have to continue to bomb Iran in order to degrade their ability to launch missiles and drones throughout the Middle East. So it's not up to us. They have unleashed, the Trump administration has unleashed a war over which they really have no control.
The U.S. said its military struck thousands of targets in Iran on the first day of the war. We're now in day 4. Iran continues to retaliate. We are seeing these missile and drone attacks all across the region. How much do you think Iran's military was weakened by those initial strikes? And do you think Iran has the firepower to keep up, especially if this does stretch into 4 or 5 weeks, even longer?
Well, there's no doubt that the Iranian military forces have been severely weakened. Israel and the United States own the skies over Iran, which means we can use platforms like the B-1 bomber, which is not stealthy, to hit targets, so that the number of bombs we can drop is now increased. And they're going after these targets like missile depots and drone storage facilities. But Iran is not launching massive waves. They're going to continue to try to drag this conflict out in time in order to weaken the will of the United States and Israel to prosecute it. So they are holding back, I'm sure, some of their munitions in order to be able to lengthen this conflict out.
Colonel, the State Department has told U.S. citizens to leave several countries in the region. Many embassies have closed. But as Joe just mentioned a moment ago, we know a lot of people are stuck in places that they were on vacation, or even yesterday we spoke with somebody who just happened to have a connecting flight in the region. What worries you when it comes to Iran's retaliation against Americans that are stuck abroad? And then I guess also the question is retaliation here at home.
Well, abroad, the Americans just need to hunker down. They need to find the safest place they can. And, if that's an air raid shelter, that's great, a basement. Maybe get out into the countryside if there are facilities there to house them where they're not as much of a target. I think eventually the American government is going to have to charter planes to go in, even in the current situation, and get Americans out of there. But I don't think that they've thought of that yet. Here at home, there's definitely a possibility of a terrorist threat. There was already one incident, potentially terrorist related, in Austin, Texas. And so, Americans just need to go about and be vigilant in their daily lives. But we've grown inured to terrorism in the United States, unfortunately, and we're pretty good at tracking down domestic terrorists.
And we'll talk more about that situation in Austin in just a moment. Colonel, one more quick question for you. We heard yesterday President Trump not ruling out boots on the ground, implying there would be what he called a big wave attack by the U.S. What do you think that wave could look like?
He may be referring to the fact that now that we have complete air superiority over Iran, we can use far more platforms to attack. And they may be ginning up a larger wave of aircraft to go in and bomb various targets in Iran. That's the only thing I can think of necessarily that he might be referring to.
Colonel Peter Mansour, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
President Trump finally publicly addressed the situation in Iran yesterday, his first comment since the strikes began on Saturday, and he spoke out during a Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House. Other than his words yesterday and two brief videos over the weekend, the president has yet to hold a real press conference since the war with Iran started. That's left many questions unanswered. NBC News political reporter Megan Leibowitz joins us now with more on that from Washington. Megan, good morning. The president then identified 4 key objectives for the U.S. military operation in Iran yesterday. Tell us what he said.
Yeah, so the president, as you mentioned, made these remarks during a Medal of Honor ceremony yesterday, laying out the objectives for the U.S. military to achieve during the course of this war. He also laid out a potential timeline, saying that he had expected that this operation could take potentially 4 to 5 weeks, though he said that whatever the time is, it's okay. Now, I want you to take a listen to how he talked about those objectives that he wants the military to achieve. Take a listen.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon.
Now, that fourth objective as well, he had said, was to ensure that Iran's government is not able to arm, fund, or direct terrorists. That's referring to Iran's proxy forces in the region, guys.
Objectives are one thing, Megan, but have we heard any more about the reasoning, the justification for this war from the Trump administration? It feels like the explanation has evolved a little bit. We're hearing different sort of reasons for doing so. What do we know at this point?
Yeah, so President Trump laid this out a bit yesterday as well. He was saying that the U.S. carried out this operation to eliminate what he referred to as grave threats that the regime posed to America. He pointed to Iran's growing ballistic missile program and also argued that Iran had ignored warnings about pursuing a nuclear program as well. Now, we also heard yesterday from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was on the Hill yesterday to brief lawmakers. He also gave an explanation as well about why the U.S. took part in this operation, saying that the U.S. knew that Israel was going to take action against Iran, and basically making the argument that if the U.S. waited and did not act preemptively, then the U.S. ultimately would have suffered higher casualties when Iran responded to Israel. Now, that explanation is getting some pushback from Democrats on the Hill, and that's something that we're going to be continuing to monitor today.
Yeah, let's listen, because Secretary of Rubio, he spoke with reporters about this yesterday. Let's listen to that.
There absolutely was an imminent threat. The hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now.
So Megan, how's Congress responding to all of this, especially with some of the shifting explanations for this?
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, this is mostly falling along party lines here, with Democrats criticizing the administration, calling this a war of choice and questioning the administration's objectives and strategy to ultimately achieve those objectives, while Republicans are still largely in line with how the administration is handling this. We heard from some lawmakers yesterday after that briefing from top administration officials, including Secretary Rubio. We heard from Democratic Senator Mark Warner, who argued that there was no imminent threat to the U.S. He said that there was a threat to Israel, and he argued that if the U.S. equates a threat to Israel as the equivalent of an imminent threat to the U.S., then we are in uncharted territory, is what he said. Now, we also heard from House Speaker Mike Johnson, who argued that the administration was justified in all of this. Lawmakers are going to get a classified briefing today as well, guys.
And Megan, are lawmakers still planning to vote on the War Powers resolution?
Yeah, we are expecting lawmakers to vote on that sometime this week. We don't know exactly when that could potentially take place here, guys, but that too mostly falling along party lines, with most Democrats arguing and pushing for this vote. A couple of Republicans as well. That vote, if it passed, would ultimately prevent President Trump from taking further military action in Iran without first getting congressional approval, guys. Now, it's going to be perhaps difficult for Democrats and those that group of Republicans who are joining with them to get those necessary votes, because Republicans control the House and the Senate, guys. So a bit of an uphill battle for them, but we're going to watch how this all plays out.
All right, Megan Leibowitz covering the political reaction from Washington. Megan, thank you so much.
Let's get more analysis with Elise Labott. She's a global affairs journalist and the author of Cosmopolitics on Substack. Elise, good morning. Always great to have you with us. I want to start by playing more sound from Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday, again, when he's talking about why the U.S. acted now to attack Iran alongside Israel. Let's listen.
It was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed.
So it sort of sounds like what Rubio's essentially saying is the imminent threat of an Iranian attack was based on this prior intelligence knowledge that Israel was going to attack Iran first. If we focus on just this particular reasoning for this, does it sound like that means that Israel forced America's hand here?
Yeah, I think Israel did force America's hand. Listen, I mean, the truth of the matter is, as we know, nobody's kind of crying for the supreme leader or for this Iranian regime. But the idea that this was planned out, the idea that the administration would think of the consequences after that, this doesn't really suggest that. And certainly when we're talking about the day after, those consequences haven't been fully thought out. But, you know, this was not clearly. It wasn't an imminent threat. And the messaging, as you know, has been changing. I think the administration's kind of trying to throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. First, it was the nuclear program. Then it was the missile program. That now it's, you know, an imminent threat against attacks against Americans. There was no imminent threat. That said, at some point, some U.S. president was going to undertake, getting rid of this Iranian regime. It's been a threat for, about half of a century. And so President Trump thought he was going to be the one to do that. But Israel has been gunning for Iran for years. After October 7th, it kind of changed the whole battlefield. Israel was always going to go this route, and the Americans decided to go with them.
The president of the White House did offer more information yesterday, trying to clarify what some of the objectives in Iran are. We'll repeat some of them. We mentioned them earlier: degrading Iran's missile capabilities, destroying Iran's navy, ensuring Iran can never get that nuclear weapon, and then trying to contain its proxy forces throughout the region. All in 4 to 5 weeks. Is that realistic?
Well, I think from speaking with officials in the region, I think the main thing right now is to get rid of those missile launchers, because the missile launchers are the ones that are able to lob these missiles and against all of the U.S. and Gulf interests. So I think that's the main thing. I think you're going to see that over the next, certainly over the next week. The nuclear program, we'll have to see. I think it's not only getting rid of the nuclear, missiles and all of the underground sites. It's also, you have to get rid of the scientists. You have to get rid of the enriched uranium. I don't think, all of the objectives probably won't be taken care of in 1 week. I think we're going to be in this for a while.
The other part of this is, of course, what comes next for Iran. We've heard the president call on Iranians to rise up and take control. What do you think happens here, and how dangerous could it get?
Well, it's not so easy for Iranians to just take to the streets. I mean, the Iranian system wasn't a one-man dictator. So now that the supreme leader is dead, that just doesn't make it easier. The systems are still in place. The Iranian military, the Basij, the militias that are still, that are kind of domestic and the ones that have been cracking down on the people, they're still there. And the question is, President Trump said this isn't regime change in terms of a U.S. objective, but is calling on the Iranians. They see the U.S. reasoning changing all the time. And I think the Iranians are afraid if they go into the streets and the Iranian military goes after them, is the administration going to be after them? And also, guys, the leadership is very leaderless. It doesn't really have that many figures that can kind of rally everybody together. There are some kind of symbolic figures like the son of the former Shah who might be able to do this. But again, the opposition doesn't have the weapons to go after the Iranian military. So it's a lot to ask the Iranian people to take it on faith that the U.S. will be there for them.
All right. Elise Labott, we appreciate your expertise here. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let's get to the weather now. Winter weather, it's not gone just yet. Some snow, some freezing rain expected in the Northeast today, but I know there's hope on the horizon, right, Angie?
Everybody is waiting for that first spring-like day, aren't we, Joe? Yes, there is some hope on the horizon, but first we got to get through maybe this kind of last gasp of winter. And we're seeing it on your commute today if you live in the Northeast. Notice there's a bit of rain, yes, and for most of the coastal areas, that's all it's going to be. But we've got the mix of some freezing rain, some snowflakes flying, and that goes all the way back towards the Great Lakes. We're going to see this impacting folks across this region at least through the day today. You can see we've got plenty of winter alerts, up to 34 million people right now across that region under those alerts. Here's how it plays out. You can see some of that snow the farther north you go, but again, places like New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. will see some icy travel for the interior Northeast, but closer to the coast, it's going to be mostly in the form of rain that you see this precipitation. That, of course, helps to melt some of that snow that is still on the ground in places from Boston to Philadelphia. So that's your good news with that. It will, though, be a little difficult on that drive throughout the day today. Though notice we could see up to 1/10 of an inch of some ice accumulation across those same areas. And then farther to the north is where you'll see that more, multiple inches coming down snowfall. That's going to be places like Vermont into Maine. 3 to 4 inches will be on the higher end. Then as we get into tomorrow, we'll see some of these kind of rain showers continuing across the Midwest. We'll get some of that large hail and those damaging winds possible, and we have the potential to see some severe weather. And here's where it's centered. Notice Dallas Metro right in the center of that. We'll have all of our threats on the table: the wind, the hail, the tornadoes. They'll be brief when it comes to the tornadoes, maybe one or two, but still the potential is there with the ingredients of the atmosphere. And then as we get into your Thursday, that rain will work up into the Great Lakes, works into the Northeast, and we'll once again see the potential for severe risk for Texas and Oklahoma. You guessed it, all of those threats once again on the table, stretching from San Angelo up into portions of Kansas. We've got Amarillo in there as well. So that'll be something that we'll have to watch over the next couple of days, Joe. We transition from snow in some spots to record warmth for most of the rest of the country, and we've got some severe weather on the table. So you're keeping me busy.
A little bit of everything. All right.
Indeed.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.